Hi, it's Steph. I'm back with some more reviews today. Today I'm going to talk about a couple of books that I've read this week. I'm in a Facebook group for fans of psychological thrillers, and it seems like most of the other people in this group are completely obsessed with Freida McFadden. So I thought, well, I should just give her books a chance and see what I think, because really they talk about them all the time. And in fact, Freida McFadden is in the group, which makes it a little awkward if you want to be critical. Because you don't want to hurt an author's feelings by saying negative things about their books. And right up front, I'm going to tell you that there will be spoilers for The Inmate in this discussion. This is more of a discussion review than like I feel like in order to really talk about the book, I have to talk about what happens in the book. So if you haven't read it and you don't want spoilers, then come back and watch this after you've read it. And if you don't care, then let's get on with it. So today we're going to talk about The Inmate. So this is one of her earlier books. And to be honest, I found it kind of annoying. I did finish it. It was a fairly quick listen. Her books aren't terribly long. And I listened to the audiobook. And I was curious how she was going to wrap it up. But I really didn't love it. I didn't find myself enjoying it. So this book has a lot of modern thrillers do this setup where they have stories start in the modern day and then they flash back, and that builds the story, and then there's a surprise twist at the end. And I think that I don't know if all of McFadden's do the flashing back and forth, but all of her books, I gather, do the surprise twist. So it's very popular right now. This is the format that a lot of thrillers and mysteries are written like. So I'm getting used to most of the books I read using it. Especially if they're written by women. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that seems to be the case for the books I've read this last 6 or 8 months. So The Inmate. Brooke Sullivan is the main character, and she's one of the stupidest protagonists I've ever read. When Brooke was 17, and this is in a flashback, this is set up in the flashbacks, she and a group of other teenagers, including her best friend Chelsea and Chelsea's boyfriend Brandon, Brooke's boyfriend Shane, and then Brooke's childhood best friend that she's known her whole life, named Tim, and a girl named Kayla that they bring along to be kind of a date for Tim. They all go to Shane's house when his mother's out of town, and they're spending the night there. They play drinking games and they just kind of hang out and do teenagey stuff for a while. So it's a dark and stormy night, and Shane's house is a farmhouse that's pretty secluded, kind of remote. Their cell phones don't work really well there. So obviously something was going to happen. They all go to bed. And of course I did tell you there would be spoilers, so I'm going to just kind of spoil everything that happens. So Shane and Brooke have sex, and it's her first time, and he claims it's his first time too. And she's written very much like a teenage girl, and this doesn't really change much, even though she's quite a bit older later in the book. And he claims that the condom came off, and so, can you guess what's going to happen? Well, that night, someone mysteriously is at the house and kills Brandon, and a couple of the girls find Brandon out in the snow covered in blood, and it's really scary, and they start freaking out. And eventually the other two girls, Kayla and Chelsea, get killed, and Tim ends up stabbed in the stomach. And then somebody tries to strangle Brooke with her snowflake necklace. So when they were kids, Tim gave her this snowflake necklace, and she always wears it. And whoever the killer is came up from behind and tried to strangle her with this necklace. And while being strangled, she's sure that the killer is Shane, because she knows what his body feels like against hers, and because he smells like Shane's sandalwood aftershave. The necklace, of course, breaks, and she manages to get away and run up the road, where she flags down a pickup truck, and she's saved. Tim survives, even though he was stabbed in the stomach. He survives. And Brooke, of course, soon discovers that she was pregnant. Her parents, who had never really approved of her dating Shane, were pretty unhappy that she wanted to keep the baby. And they decide to keep it a secret from everyone else in town. So they homeschool her for the rest of the school year. And then she leaves town as soon as she can. She and her son, Josh, live in a small apartment in Brooklyn. And now it's like 10 years into the present time. And she's kind of estranged from her parents. And then her parents both die in a car accident. And they leave the house to her. So she returns to her hometown of Raker for the now portions of the book. She mentions that she's glad to give Josh a chance at a new start. So this is her 10-year-old son, because he was being bullied at his old school for not having a father and having been born out of wedlock, which, really? Like, she has a cell phone and Wi-Fi, and she has since her teen years. So this is clearly set in the present day. And her son was being bullied at school for not having a father in Brooklyn? Like, where did he go to school? 1965? I mean, I don't know. Come on. Like, that's one of the least believable elements of this story. But maybe not the stupidest. So she returns to Raker, and the only job she can get is as a nurse practitioner at the federal prison, which happens to be where Shane is serving a life sentence for the murders that happened that night. And the attempted murder on her and Tim. So she takes this job having never met the attending physician, which is also a bit far-fetched. What maximum security prison would have a doctor on staff who just never shows up at work? I don't know. But so Brooke takes the job, also knowing full well that she would eventually cross paths with Shane because he's serving time there. And Shane is, of course, the father of her son, but he doesn't know that they have a son. So she kind of tries to hedge a little bit and like pretend that her son is younger than he is and stuff when she talks to Shane. I don't know. It's a little over the top. So one of the first things that Brooke is told about working at the prison is to not tell any prisoner anything about her personal life. And she pretty much immediately does. I told you she's stupid. And then she and Shane, he's brought in because he was in a fight and he's got some injuries and stuff. And so they start having conversations and time passes and he has another fight and he's brought in again. And then as they're talking, she begins to second guess her former testimony that he was the killer and the one who had tried to strangle her with her necklace. In the meantime, Brooke hires this nice older lady named Margie to come in and look after Josh after school. And she's perfect. She cooks them hot meals and she dotes on Josh and she's really supportive of Brooke. And she's like amazing. And also meanwhile, Brooke and her childhood best friend Tim, who is now the vice principal at Josh's new school, start to date. And he's great with Josh and he seems perfect and they connect really well. They've known each other their whole lives and he's been in love with her for their whole lives. And the only time they really weren't in contact was for this 10 years that she went away. So everything is great, but the author wants us to start suspecting Tim. So all kinds of things are tossed in there to make you think Tim might actually have been the killer that night. It was pretty effective. For a minute I did wonder. I was like, is she setting this up that Tim is the killer? Like, was he really the one who did it? So of course there are flashbacks that build up to the murders that happened when Brooke was 17. The night of the murders, the killer does the classic cliche things of slashing tires and cutting the phone landline. And like I said, their cell phones didn't really work very well. And so one by one, the teenagers are picked off when they're alone and they still keep splitting up. And as I mentioned, Brooke gets away because the necklace that the killer was trying to strangle her with breaks, which is kind of, well, duh. Like, what necklace owned by a teenage girl is going to be strong enough to strangle her with? Like, it's probably a very, very thin chain. I mean, of course that was going to break. I'm surprised that the killer didn't use a scarf or, anything else. So in the present, everything is going great for Brooke and Tim until one night he has her over for dinner. And he sends her down to the basement to get a bottle of wine. And when she's in the basement, she discovers the body of a local woman who's been missing. So this body's in Tim's basement under a tarp. And that woman and Tim had gone out a couple of times prior to Brooke moving back. And so Brooke, of course, freaks out. Now she's really starting to convince herself that Tim must have been the killer all along. So then she goes to get out of the basement and the door sticks and she can't get out. Tim lets her out, saying, the door was stuck. And when she says she's leaving, Tim, who has no idea why she's upset, tries to get her to stay because it was going to be this romantic evening. And she thinks this must be because he's the murderer from all those years ago and now he's killing again. And then the police show up. Someone called in an anonymous tip. While Brooke is trying to leave, the police come and they say that the missing lady had been seen at Tim's house, and ultimately Tim ends up going to prison. And Brooke recants her former testimony against Shane because now she's convinced that the killer was Tim all along. And Shane is released from prison, like just that easily, because that's how it really works. I don't think that's how the courts and the prison system really work. But anyway, so Brooke picks up Shane from the prison, and she takes him home with her to her home where her 10-year-old son is there. And his first night out of prison, she sleeps with him, like smart girl. And then the next day, he convinces her to drive him out to his deserted farmhouse. She really doesn't want to go, but he kind of manipulates the situation by talking Josh, into wanting to go. So he inherited the house when his mother died, is what he tells her. And it's a big mess. So they spend some time cleaning, and then Shane decides to take Josh out for a walk in the woods that are like adjacent to the house, and they're going to build a snowman, and it's going to be fun. And Brooke begins thinking and remembering the night of the murders again. And then she decides that Shane and Tim must have committed the murders together. There's no way one person could have done it by themselves. So she calls Shane. She does get him on the phone, but he refuses to bring Josh back, and he threatens her, basically confessing that he was the killer all along. And of course, when she tries to call 911 right after that, her phone signal is gone. So she also, of course, twists her ankle and is having a hard time getting around. And Shane has taken her car keys. So she leaves the farmhouse and she kind of hobbles in the snow up the road. And down the road along comes Margie, the old woman who babysits Josh. She just happens to be coming along this kind of remote road that only leads back to this farmhouse in the woods in her SUV. So Margie gets out. And they talk for a minute, and then Margie pulls a gun out of her purse, and she explains that she is actually Shane's mother, Pamela. Brooke didn't recognize her, even though she had kind of known her when she was in high school, because Pamela had put on some weight and aged. And I guess Shane lied about her being dead. So she and Shane had done all the killing together. She does the exposition dump. They also killed another classmate of the kids, of Brooke, Shane, and Tim, who had died a few months before the murders at the farmhouse. So this woman, who was middle-aged at the time when the kids were 17, managed to take down Brandon, a football-playing teenage boy, all by herself with a knife. Okay. Well, I'm a middle-aged woman, and I can tell you right now that a teenage boy, even one who doesn't play football, could fight me off and get away from me fairly easily. I mean, he could outrun me. Even if even in really good shape. Most teenage boys can outrun a middle-aged woman. And she didn't use a gun. She used a knife on him, which requires close contact and like some measure of strength. So that's just another element of this story that I was like, really? Really? And so you may be asking, what's the reasoning? Why did Pamela kill a bunch of teenagers? Well, she and Shane wanted to kill Brooke. And if they wanted to kill Brooke, I don't know why they chose a night when Brooke and Shane wouldn't be alone, which is just one of the many dumb things. And so then the next question is, well, why would they want to kill Brooke? Well, when Shane was 5 years old, Brooke's father, who was known to sleep around and cheat on her mother, had an affair with Pamela, and she fell in love with him. But he decided to stay with his wife and daughter. And the consequence of that, of him not choosing Pamela and Shane, was that they struggled financially, and she always blamed him. And basically, she's a crazy psycho woman. So she also confesses that she killed Brooke's parents to punish them for keeping Josh a secret after she learned about him. she killed Brooke's parents in a car accident. It's not really explained how she pulled that off. I mean, there's a lot of luck involved, I guess, if you want to call it luck, because a lot of things can go wrong with a plan like that. And then we later find out that the way she discovered Josh existed was because Brooke's former employer had posted photos of a Christmas party on social media. Brooke herself had avoided social media, which was a requirement of her parents when they were supporting her financially. So she just had never done that, and she wasn't the one who gave it away. It was just a random post on social media. So Brooke and Pamela scuffle over the gun, and it goes off a couple of times. One of the times it hits Pamela, and she goes down. Brooke takes off in her car with the gun. She's going to go find Shane and Josh, and of course she's panicky about what's going to happen to Josh because he's with this killer. She finds Josh, and he is like wandering out of the woods, and he takes her back to where Shane is, and he says that a bunch of snow and ice fell on him from a tree, and there Shane is, dead. Pamela happens to survive, and she ultimately just confesses to everything because now that Shane is dead, she has no reason not to, and so she goes off to prison, and Tim is let out. And then a little time passes and things are kind of weird and awkward, but Brooke and Tim, of course, start dating again. That's how the book ends. Well, that's almost how the book ends. So I feel like one of the dumber, least believable things in this book is the complete lack of forensic evidence linking Shane to the murders. So you're telling me that in our modern age, they just kind of looked over the scene. They took the word of a traumatized 17-year-old, and without any other evidence, Shane was convicted. And worse, when Brooke recants her testimony 10 years later, they're like, okay, we'll let him out. Like, because there was no evidence against him. And similarly, was there any proof that Tim killed the girl found in his basement? Was there physical evidence? Did an investigation even happen? I mean, you know, the author kind of just brushes past those sorts of things and just, you know, this happened and then this happened. So it seems like the whole world just kind of takes Brooke's word for things, and she waffles so much. It was Shane, it was Tim, it was both Tim and Shane, and until she and Margie Pamela have it out in the woods. So it's also kind of dumb that she immediately believed Tim must be the killer after finding a body in his basement. She had been so sure it was Shane. She had said so over and over and over. And then she never questions why Tim would send her down to the basement for wine if he was hiding a body down there. I mean, it's fairly obvious someone set him up. How did Tim, 10 years before, with a stab wound to his stomach, put on sandalwood cologne and managed to try to strangle Brooke with the stupid necklace? I don't know. So many readers seem to really love this book. I was just kind of disappointed. And the things I pointed out aren't everything. A lot of the writing and dialogue and word choices felt like I was reading YA or even juvenile fiction. And this is a professional author with many fans, so I kind of expected better writing. And I figured I would read another of her books, one that was written more recently, which I did, and see if I liked it any better. Because this book was just not one of the better thrillers that I've read. I was really disappointed, especially with how much praise she gets online. The twist was okay, but getting there was just not very satisfying. So this book has an epilogue from Josh's point of view, in which he tells how one day when Tim was dating his mom the first time around, Tim had warned him that someday a man named Shane Nelson might come looking for Brooke and Josh, and Josh was to be very careful of him. So that day in the woods, when Josh heard Shane on the phone with his mom being all like mean and threatening, he decided to do something about it. And he shook the tree that dumped a bunch of snow and ice down on Shane, and that knocked him down, but it didn't kill him. He might have been unconscious, I can't remember exactly. But Josh, a 10-year-old boy, took a large icicle and beat Shane to death with it because he would do anything to protect his mother. Right. So this little kid beat a grown man to death with an icicle. Josh has even described at one point in the book as being small for his age. So the author really wants us to suspend our disbelief here. Also, it feels like maybe she wants us to think that A, the apple doesn't fall too far from the homicidal tree, and B, maybe Josh will one day do something worse, which actually is a smart setup if you're going to continue with these characters. She hasn't, as far as I know, but anyway, I wouldn't recommend this book to thriller readers. I don't know why. McFadden is as popular as she is in the psychological thriller groups. I understand that she's self-published, and maybe that's part of, I don't know, maybe that's part of her appeal to some people, but also part of the issues I'm having with her book, with the book The Inmate. So I'm going to talk about the other book that I read in my next video, and I'll let you know if I feel like she has matured a little bit in her career. But thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.